Hello and thanks for checking out ChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide working together to learn the charts, generate profit, and achieve financial independence. For access to daily live chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chat community, along with dozens of hours of exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Let's check out some charts. Checking in on the USMJ sector, we certainly know the Canadian side of things are bloody and getting all the attention. The views on the videos that I've been doing recently have 150% increase in views as opposed to the average. That's because things are so ugly, more eyes on the sector. But we're noticing the shift the past couple days to US operators having some really nice green days while Canadian MJ continues to dump. So the thesis is some money is moving out of Canada into the USMJ names. We certainly know USMJ names still have their own fair share of problems with access to capital, with the regulatory environment as far as the government. And we are patiently waiting for that to change. Still definitely think there's going to be a massive hype run in the USMJ sector eventually, although this Canadian bubble popping is definitely going to make that USMJ bull run less significant in my opinion, because people will be smarter. We will have less FOMO, less euphoria. People will be a bit more skeptical. So that's important to note. But again, once we have the political catalysts or the changes that we are looking for, I do believe that that will be certainly enough to significantly spark things. Again, that could be years from now, but that's something that we're certainly paying attention to. One thing that some of our members are doing, and these are people that I've had personal conversations with, is they are working on their side hustles right now. One of them, just off the top of my head specifically, is opening back up his food truck business to begin stacking capital for when this opportunity presents itself, and being very patient in the meantime, not trying to time any bottoms, not wanting to hold any bags, and knowing when the FOMO comes back in, that's when the time to strike will be. And if you have been building capital to utilize in that environment when it does come, that's obviously a pretty good way to go about doing things. So I think that's smart. Get your hustle on. I can remember back in the day, I was slanging paintings on eBay and doing yard work, and that definitely was adding to my own account and helped for certain runs that would follow after that. So looking at the USMJ space, we have a ton of earnings coming up this coming week. Let's pull up this week's incoming earnings. So here we go. We've got TRUL Monday after hours, Cura is Tuesday after hours, Harv is Wednesday pre-market, GTI Wednesday after hours, and IAN Thursday after hours. We have a handful more the following week. There's 3 more, MedMen, and then the other 2 are off the top of my head, maybe CL, and then there's 1 more, but I'm only concerned about this coming week for now. So we'll be keeping an eye on those names. Certainly don't expect them to be as ugly as Canadian MJ, so that's one positive. Question will be, will the market respond bullish? And that remains to be seen, and that will be where we stand right now in the sectors. Is USMJ was hit harder than Canadian MJ until this point. So a lot of the USMJ operators are down 70 to 80% from their all-time highs, and now the Canadian MJ names, Cron and CGC, they're all down 75% from their highs. So really it's just the Canadian MJ names weakness catching up to where USMJ already was, and now USMJ is trying to see a bit of a bottom in response to that. So GWPH, we did drop to a lower low, but with no bear follow through right now. So whenever we see that happen, we start to scout for the potential of a falling wedge, which just means bears running out of momentum. We certainly know the market has been strong up at all-time highs, and the MJ sector certainly not benefiting from that. But I'd be watching this 4-hour time frame on GWPH and watching to see if this falling wedge does break bullish. When this falling wedge does break bullish, if it does, we zoom out to the daily chart and we look at daily resistance. Our last little lower high was 114.49. Anything under that keeps the daily downtrend intact. But at this point, the bulls are just doing everything that they can to establish this base of support at 105, which is at this moment a double bottom. So the bulls are going to do everything they can to hold that level and try and shift momentum off of it. IIPR, daily little uptrend continues. So a really nice bounce at this point from the low to where we stand. Another daily higher low has formed at 78.55. That's now our most important short-term support level, and the bulls are trying to break 86.57 to see continuation with a higher high. Look at the daily exponential moving averages. They crossed bearish up in the 120s, and now they're about to cross bullish for the first time. The weekly time frame, anything under anything under 98.83 is just a lower high. So that's the most important resistance. And we have two scenarios of how this is going to play out. We're either going to see the bulls continue this daily uptrend and break 98 resistance. I don't think that's the most likely scenario. What I'm going to be watching for is the potential rejection from 98, considering it's still 15% from where we stand right now. And if we lose the daily uptrend before breaking 98, we will then be looking at our weekly lower high being set. And I will be watching for the potential of an inverse head and shoulders on the weekly with our left neckline at 98.83. If we top out somewhere underneath that 90, let's call it 99. Let's call it 100. If we top out under 100, then we're looking for a weekly lower high, and then we'll have to set the weekly high or low and change that trend. So bigger picture, this is definitely looking maybe 3 weeks out from now. So keeping that in the back of our mind that we may need to set one more weekly lower high, then a higher low, and then a trend change, which would give us our monthly higher low. Keeping in mind that we saw a big time bull move on no monthly consolidation. We then pulled back from the all-time high very significantly to try and find that monthly higher low. And now it looks like that monthly higher low is potentially starting to shape up. We ended up pulling back over 50% in just 4 months. So keep an eye on IIPR over the next few weeks, and let's see how much strength we have on this daily uptrend to see, can we break 99 on the initial test, or do we have to set another weekly lower high and set a weekly higher low after that? Curaleaf, very impressive recovery. Again, anytime you see increasing bull volume, make note of that in this sector for both US and Canadian MJ. The reason being, it's been so infrequent that we've seen that happen in the last 6 months. So we ended up starting this bounce as a potential bear flag, very weak bounce. And then we saw that upgrade day where the bulls couldn't hold any of their gains, and then a very significant recovery from what was almost a bit of a disaster, in the sense that we could have very easily dropped down to a lower low after all of that big profit taking upper wick on that candlestick. But here we are with a significant bounce, with earnings approaching, and with where we stand, we have a decent amount of space, 20+%, that we can pull back before we break our recent low. So now that we've shifted momentum enough on the daily time frame, we zoom out to the weekly and we say, all right, great bounce, but anything under 1084 is just a weekly lower high. And that's still almost 50% from where we stand. And actually it's more in line with 40%. But the bottom line is we're still way far away from that weekly resistance, 40%. So even if we have a bullish reaction to earnings, we're going to be watching for the potential of a lower high compared to 1084. And we will continue to need weekly trend changes. Why has TRUL stood out compared to anybody on any side of the border? It's because of its weekly uptrend. So we need every individual name to give us a weekly uptrend if we're going to, breathe a sigh of relief for bulls in this sector. And we're still a ways away from that happening. So Curaleaf will have to top out wherever that ends up being, hold the weekly low, and then change the weekly trend into 2020 if we're going to see a momentum shift. CWeb. So CWeb had a bearish reaction to earnings. It's one of the names in the US side of things that have already reported. But the difference is, whereas the Canadian reports are bearish, we see gap downs, we see dumps, and so far we've seen no bounces and no bottom on those dumps. CWeb is already back to where it was before earnings. So it's a very quick bounce. That being said, we're just looking for a daily lower high compared to 1533. If the bulls are going to try and change this trend, again, another little inverse head and shoulders here with our left shoulder. If we cannot break 1533 on this attempt, we will set a lower high. We'll have to hold the low by pulling back, holding 1136, and then changing that daily trend. Again, that's just step number one. Then we zoom out to the weekly and look for the weekly lower high to be set. So still a very long road. It's nice to see 2 green days in the US MJ space while Canadian MJ goes red, but it does not make a dent in what we need to see happen, bigger picture, for a more significant momentum shift. So CWeb just looking for the daily lower high, but keeping an eye out for the potential of a trend change into next week or through next week. TRUL just massive dip buying after this consolidation, and it was definitely everybody getting in heading into earnings, which is interesting because if you go back historically, we generally dump on earnings. The earnings have been good. TRUL is definitely making a name for itself for being profitable in a sector where that is rare, and the earnings, we react bearish to it. So it's interesting that we see this big green day, and it's one of the biggest green days that you will find on this chart. And the volume is not huge, which is worth noting. It looks like, this pullback cleared out sellers and cleared out the order book. And what I mean by that is the same reason that I like oversold bounces to be waterfall because you clear out the order book and it makes that bounce that much easier. So, on this kind of volume, if we didn't just pull back and then work through where we just pulled back from, I don't think this kind of volume would have resulted in this big of a gain. But either way, what we're looking at is earnings on Monday, and can the bulls, the market right now, everybody on Friday that got in is betting on the pattern breaking of bearish earnings reactions. So it's going to be very interesting. Our most important support from here will be 1291. We've got resistance that broke, so a higher high was hit. You can see the end of the day just surge to ensure that real strong close. And the next resistance from here, as this weekly chart continues to outshine all of its peers, we're looking at 1537 and then 1807. And then we're starting to talk about looking back up at the all-time high. That's still a ways away. Let's look at the monthly for TRUL. Equilibrium. So we got our high, low, lower high, higher low, and we're certainly going to be looking for a lower high compared to 2165. And this monthly equilibrium is going to be one to be watching probably into Q2 2020, maybe even. So it's going to be interesting. Why has TRUL done so well? You can point to the fact that they have profitable earnings. You can point to the fact that they are dominating Florida. You can point to the fact that 2020, Florida has a pretty good chance of legalizing. And if that were to take place, the state where they have a stronghold grip would then see their target market increase tenfold or whatever it is. The population of Florida is 55% the population of all of Canada. So I think it's a little bit early to be pricing in something a year away. So I don't think it's that, but whatever it is, bulls are responding and everybody in the sector is looking longingly at this chart and saying, well, I want my play to be up 35% from the recent lows and in a weekly uptrend. But the monthly equilibrium will rule all. And again, it's so wide. There's so much space within this equilibrium that we could very easily see this play out well into 2020. Congrats to the bulls. IAN, still trying to see this shift to hold 152. Most important resistance is 197. Little bit of a base of support there. If we can't break 197, bulls aren't proving anything to us. The weekly time frame is trying to set a higher low, and to change the weekly trend, we have to hold 152 and break 245. So again, just simple math. We need 71 cents for a bull break, and we need 25 cents for a bear break. So we're much closer to a bear break than a bull break. We have to see a bullish reaction to earnings to try and change this weekly trend, and we're watching the exponential resistances, which have been a bit of a visual guide on the weekly chart. But first things first, if we're going to set our weekly high or low, we need to change the daily trend. And anything under, like I said, 197 is a lower high. Have to change the daily trend. That'll be our weekly high or low being set. And then we'll look to see, can the bulls change the weekly trend? A lot of work ahead if the bulls are going to pull that off. CL. So CL tried to bounce. CL is another name that's trying to find its weekly high or low. Have to hold 667 and break the daily triple top of 889 to change the weekly trend. And earnings are going to dictate whether the bulls can pull that off or not. So we're at a critical junction. I said in a recent video a week ago that Canadian MJ earnings are going to be the most important for me, technically speaking, because of where we stood on the chart. And US MJ is fairly similar in the sense that a lot of these names, the earnings reaction is either going to dictate a drop to lower lows, as it did in Canada, or going to dictate a potential for a weekly trend change if that momentum shift is significant enough. And again, timing could not be more perfect for any kind of SAFE Act news. There's nothing out there. I'm not hearing anything. Impeachment definitely sidetracked that possibility, and it would certainly be a breath of fresh air. But again, as I've been saying for a long time now, I'm not holding my breath for it. I'm not assuming it's going to take place. I'm assuming it's not going to take place. And if it does take place, I will react accordingly. OH trying for its daily high or low. Nice bounce on Friday. So 363 is our low. High of the bounce is 550. Higher low is now 393. And you can see the range that we have in here just with the illiquidity on these USMJ names, where we can go 51% over 4 days, and then we give it back, we pull back 30% in 4 days. So bulls, we're going to be looking for a lower high compared to 550. OH will react to CL earnings, which are in 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. So low, high, higher low, scouting a lower high, and we will need a clear daily trend change if we are going to see a shift in momentum from this low. MedMen earnings are coming up. They put out a PR after hours saying they're cutting their workforce. Big, long press release saying this is what we're going to do to save the sinking ship. And we'll see how the market reacts on Monday. They have earnings in 2 weeks, and anything under 163 is just a lower high, and we're right on the verge of a new all-time low. GTII, very significant bull day, very solid volume, and again, just creating more space off of the low. 1280 and 1298 are the most important resistances, but you could call this a daily trend change. This isn't a very clear pivot point for me for a little higher low and higher high, but this is multiple days with a lower high and lower low each day into continuation. So I will call that a daily trend change. 1060 is our daily higher low, and again, we're looking back at those resistances in the upper $12 range. The weekly time frame, 1445 is the most important level. So weekly time frame, we'll look at that once we clear 1290, 1298 and 1280. But as of right now, those are the most important levels. I almost want to condense this down to look for a bit more clarity. I like the 3-day chart, where you can see anything under 1298, just a little lower high, as bulls work on trying to shift this momentum. And GTII earnings Wednesday after hours. So that'll be key. We're either going to be heading right back down to 991, or we're going to be looking up at 1298. HARV earnings are Wednesday. And again, just critical. Look at this level. We're just building a base of support, and we're either going to take out these supports on a bearish reaction, or at least test them on a bearish reaction, or we're going to distinctively, I don't know if that's a right word, but we're going to clearly get over the high of the last 5 weeks if it's a bullish reaction. And we already broke that resistance, but we just saw no follow through. We pulled back, we formed a daily higher low. 327 is the most important short-term support for me. And now we need a break of 394, and then we're looking at 4 and 452. And you're starting to get to an area where we've been so weak in these USMJ names that there is big space in between resistance levels. I mean, you can see where if we clear 4 psychological, we're talking 12-13% before the next resistance level, and then after 452 we're looking up at 528, so another 12+% before the next resistance level. So if we can shift this momentum due to earnings, it'll be notable. Critical levels, just like it was for Canadian MJ. Canadian MJ was worst case scenario for bulls, and as clear and distinct bearish follow through as you can get, and bulls in the USMJ space are hoping for the opposite reaction. KSHB never changed the daily trend. Huge bounce, never changed the daily trend. CGC did the same thing. CGC on the daily time frame, 1789 to 2248, huge bounce, never changed it. Look how similar these look. Big move, tried to form a higher low, failed, dropped to lower lows. KSHB, big move, tried to hold a higher low, failed, dropping to lower lows. So we don't have any clear support here. We're looking at 150 and 126. And anything under 193 is just a lower high. If we cannot get follow through with trend changes, we do not put pressure on bears. We see no signs of bulls buying dips. We get no follow through, and it's just more opportunity for bears to short as long as that keeps happening. So weekly time frame has to hold the low of 126 and break 212 to change the weekly trend. KSHB has already gotten earnings out of the way. Not a ton of reaction on those earnings, but just a slow fade. CVSI, 125, trying to hold. It's a double bottom. Doesn't mean anything unless we break 182. Anything under 182 is just a lower high, and CVSI definitely still significantly struggling. If you look at the size of the pullback, certainly in line with the weakness we're seeing all over the place, but no short-term relief in sight unless we can rally off that 125 level, because after 125, we're looking down at $1 and then just a lack of support. And we haven't even tested weekly exponential resistance on any bounce attempt in months. You can just see how a visual guide that is rejection, 2, 3, 4, didn't even get there, but at least 4 rejections from that resistance. NBEV, still extremely weak as well. Earnings was a bust. Daily inside bar trying to recover from those earnings. You can see we're just trading sideways. Little bit of a bull attempt on Friday, no follow through. And anything on the daily chart under 277 is just a lower high. And again, these downtrends are just brutal, and there's no support. As soon as we broke 303, no support below it. And now we're looking down at 169 after 2 psychological. PYX, also extremely weak. Anything on the daily under 1072 is just a lower high. Weekly time frame, weekly exponential resistance continues to reject the price for months. 1130 broke. 985 broke. 833. 833 and 831 are the most important support levels. And it looks like those are all-time lows. Potential play for a short-term bounce off of those levels. And we already bounced Monday, or Friday, I should say, right off those levels. So no follow-through, and we are definitely risking all-time lows on PYX. ZYNE holding 587, but we have to break 691 for it to do anything to change that daily trend. Weekly time frame, clear downtrend of lower highs and lower lows. Let's look at the monthly. I would expect a monthly higher low here, obviously compared to 275, but there's a support at 446. But again, just ugly. I don't have any interest in these last 5 names. I keep an eye on them, but until they significantly shift their momentum, I haven't traded USMJ in a while personally, and I'm waiting for a shift, and I'm not going to be holding positions for earnings because it's a gamble. I'd like to see that shift take place in response to earnings, and then I'll start to play them a little bit more, but when I do, I just am not interested in all of these names on the tail end here. I will be interested in TRUL, Curaleaf, OH, GTII. Those are the names that I'm going to have interest in. IIPR, I do like this setup. Forming on IIPR, the ideal setup for me will it be if we reject from 99, pull back for a higher low around 80 or the upper 70s, and then look to enter on that weekly higher low. So I'm going to continue paying close attention to IIPR over the next few weeks. So thanks again. Hope you are well. Let's see what earnings brings us. Again, it's not going to look as bad, but it all depends on what the expectations of the market are as to what we get. See you next week. Have a good day. Do good things.